Just stand right here and, just step in.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
So I've seen some people opening up the gin bottles. Good. It's very late, so I'm not even sure if I'll run the presentation. I was sort of trying to understand what I was doing here and what kind of excuse I had to be here. And it sort of started with Per-Jürgen, who has been up on stage, who is one of the early investors in Avito, and who asked me long time ago to come for this event. And normally we don't participate in events like this if we are not in a big demand for money, which we're not now. So one of those very un-Swedish things to say, which is what I'm very proud of, is that we have raised $170 million in cash. But what I'm even more proud of is that we actually have $170 million in cash on our balance sheet. That's good. And that also makes me very happy when I'm listening to all these great young entrepreneurs here, that I don't have to suffer through these questions. And I know that they walked out of here and they're like, oh, they're such idiots. They're asking these questions, what? And for all of you investors, it's always nice to meet people who've done their homework on the cases that they're getting pitched, because then the questions are relevant and interesting, and you feel loved as an entrepreneur. And if you have a really good case, then you might even have the ability to cherry pick, which is nice. So I was trying to think of how to connect sort of the excuse of being here and the sort of background of having absolutely no business in the US at all, and obviously dreaming of moving to Malibu when I've sold the company or IPO'd the company. But apart from that, we have stayed away because it's a pretty competitive market. And so the excuse, apart from coming because Per-Jürgen asked, was because I love New York. And I was now able to fly in front of the curtain, which was very nice. They have these flat beds, which I enjoyed very much. Pretty expensive wine as well, which I also enjoyed. And then I actually checked into the Mandarin Oriental, which my taxi cab driver, he's asking me, he's like, so how much is a room there? And I was like, yeah, I don't even have a good room. I said, I have Hudson View. Oh, really? Hudson View? How much is it? $8.95 per night. And he's like, no way! I was like, yes way. And then finally, it's sort of the real excuse was that having built a company in Russia primarily is a pretty special thing and a special place to be. I don't know how many of you have spent any considerable time in Russia behind the Iron Curtain, but I have many years, and so has my wife. And my wife, now my cousin is here, Fia, who has been the global marketing director and one of the first employees at Spotify. She's here listening. I know she's feeding back to my wife what I'm saying now, so I'll speak a bit of her. And this is one of those things that you guys who are now building companies have to think about it. And that's sort of think about who you partner up with, if you partner up, except with your business partners, because you already have and you will be spending a lot of time building your business. And imagine having a wife who is happily walking around in Stockholm, which is a pretty nice place, and then one night having her husband coming home and saying, we're actually considering moving to Moscow. And she's like, Moscow, Russia? Yes. And she's like, okay. And then actually agreeing to do that within sort of 6 weeks of getting the first notice. And then spending 4 years in Moscow, leaving her career, getting pregnant in Moscow, so my children are made in Russia. I'll get them a tattoo. They seem to be pretty good quality. And then giving birth in Stockholm, which is a much safer place to give birth to children in. And then having her husband. We got twins, one boy and one girl. And she actually spent 18 months, the first 18 months of my children's life, alone in Stockholm. I was in Moscow, 5 to 6 days per week. So I was thinking, good excuse, bring her to New York and let her use my credit card. That's that was the best excuse to come here, actually. And now my daughter has a high fever, so she's texting me like, should I go? And I'm like, think about the shopping. So instead of talking about the business so much, I was, again, trying to connect the dots between Sweden and US and sort of doing business in strange countries like Russia and in the sort of MENA region in Africa, where I've been staying as well. And I think one of the benefits that I've had is that I've actually spent time meeting the guys at NASDAQ here. We have also been traveling around in the US, and I've been working for an American company. So I actually sold my previous business to eBay. And selling your company to eBay is a fantastic thing when you build a business, because that was the holy grail of companies that could acquire the company. Part of doing that was, unfortunately, that I had to sign a pretty thick contract. And you guys who are American know that Americans take their contracts very seriously, which is good for all of you entrepreneurs to know, that it actually sometimes pays to pay these consultants that we're pitching here from Ernst & Young and other places. They're very expensive, sometimes not very helpful, but sometimes it helps. And part of that contract was to that I could not leave for 2 years. Or actually, I can leave because Sweden has very tight rules on those things. But if I stayed, I would double my salary, apart from the cash we got when we sold, and I would have what's called golden handcuffs. And golden handcuffs, that's something that it's basically handcuffs that you can remove, but then there's no gold. And if you stay for 2 years, the gold can be turned into warrants or even money. And here I had my first encounter with corporate America. And I would say that the culture clash between eBay, which was a company that I looked up to for years, and my Swedish team, where I had employed sort of the 60 people that was on the team when we sold the company, it was like an atomic bomb. And you had to try to sort of see the fun in it, not to break down. And one very strong episode here was when the HR director of eBay flew in with his team to Stockholm to meet my team. And he started to talk about the values and the rules of conduct working in the eBay family. And the most important part of this was, everyone sat silent. Completely silent for an hour. And then the conclusion, he said, was that if you ever have any problems with any of your peers, you have to report this to your next manager. And everyone was like this, squirming, because we were quite rude to each other in a very fun way. And so what we did was that after he had done this, we invented the imaginary bell, which we rang every time anyone sort of passed over the threshold of this US company. And this bell, it was ringing all the time in the office, like ding, 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 that's, taking it one step too far. And there were a lot of these episodes, and having built a business, having had the being fortunate enough to employ all the people you work with, which is fantastic, and then having twice the salary, money in the bank, some golden handcuffs, working half as much as I ever did before, and really having no responsibility because I was no longer the CEO. That sounds pretty good. And it was fun for about sort of a month or so, going to Palo Alto, meeting Meg and some of the managers and looking at some data. But then it dawned on me, these guys are so slow. I mean, I couldn't even imagine how they could have built this business, because it was like going from running a Ferrari to driving a tractor. So we were sitting on these all-team calls from across the world, trying to figure out what to do. All of these guys were brilliant. You know, they were from McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, and they all wanted to be entrepreneurs, so they joined eBay. But no one really had a role. They had micro roles. And here we had a team with 60 people who had been driving the Ferrari, just making decisions like this. So it was an unbelievable clash of cultures. And I was extremely miserable already after 3 years. So then a friend of order asks, so how did you come to Russia? And the fun part is that in this thick Bible of an agreement that eBay wrote, it actually stated that I could not start a business anywhere in the world online. And here again, going back to the lawyers, we had a nice team of lawyers as well on our team. And they're like, you know, you can't write contracts like this. And I was like, yeah, but, you know, does it really matter? But you can't. So I said, yeah, but they will never let me start a business in Sweden. No, but, you know, there could be other markets that are relevant. And I was like, okay. So, and we have to win something as well. We can't just give to these Americans. We can't just give to them. And what happened here is that a few years earlier, I was fundraising for Tradera as well, and I came across Adolf Lundin, who is a very famous Swedish entrepreneur, and he's unfortunately dead now, but he has created a lot of wealth for a lot of people, including him and his family. And he took a meeting with me and one of my colleagues in Geneva, and we did a presentation, and then he asked a few questions, which were actually pretty smart, and he was about 70 at the time. And then he said, gentlemen, let's adjourn. And he took all his managers with him, and then he just left the room, and I was sitting there. Then he came back 20 minutes later, and he said, good presentation, it looks like we're going to invest. And that was, you know, without haggling, there was nothing. And then he said, let's go and have lunch. And during that lunch, he said, you guys should really look at Russia. And this was several years before I even considered Russia. So one thing led to another. Miserable, a phone call from a guy called Yuri Milner. Some of you might know DSD. He's the founder of DSD, which is now one of the most successful internet investors in the world. At this time, he was poor. His wife was complaining because they didn't have a house, and he hadn't done Facebook, Klarna, Alibaba, JD, and some other businesses. And he's now having a house, which is the biggest one in Silicon Valley. He called and asked me if I wanted to come to Russia. And along those lines, I went to Russia and spent a lot of time with him. And then told my grandmother, I'm considering going to Russia. She started to cry and said, you will be killed. And so I told Yuri, I can't do it. My grandmother will die if I do it. So I went back to my previous investors and asked them for money. And that's on the way Avito started. And I've spent 6 years in Russia since. And we built a fantastic business. And I think it's hopefully the largest tech company ever created in Sweden as of to date. We'll see. Thank you very much.